Hey, welcome guys. Today we are going to be building something a little bit smaller. You saw the review. This is a 1/48 scale Tamiya Firefly. Now, I almost exclusively build armor, I guess like most people do in 1/35 scale. I really wanted to do a Firefly. It's one of my favorite Shermans, which is obviously one of my favorite tanks, but this is their only offering, at least that is not discontinued. They have a 35th scale option, and it's $160 on eBay. So screw whoever that person is trying to sell that. I got this one for just under 30 bucks, and we are going to build this from start to finish. Obviously, we're working on the lower half of the hull now. If you have built a 48 scale Tamiya kit in the 2000s, or the kit's released now, come with this die cast hull. So you'll see a little bit of super glue being used, as well as our Tamiya extra thin, as always, as we get this assembled. The die cast hull, it's definitely nice to feel the weight in the tank. It's heavier than a Tiger in 35th scale, but I don't know, kind of gimmicky. Anyways, I do like it overall. It's just not as good of detail as the plastic, but so be it. We are here and we're building it. This is the slightly difficult part, is if you build using Tamiya extra thin, the beauty of the extra thin is it really pulls the plastic together. So the parts might fit 99%. When that extra thin gets in there, it fits 110%. You don't have quite the same, suction, I guess, as with super glue, but it works good enough. Just really make sure that you dry fit a lot, as we're doing here before we glue. This is the back plate being glued onto the lower hull, and then we'll start working on the bogies. We'll get the poly caps put in here to the drive sprockets, which will make those rotate. We can actually get everything but the idlers to rotate on this kit. You see there's quite a bit of sanding to do on these bogies, and I don't know the name of it, someone can put it in the comments, but the little return roller is molded, and there's a mean seam going down the middle there, so hence all of the ugly green sanded plastic. It is the ugliest of all colors after it's been sanded, or to be sanded, I guess, in scale modeling. And it is obviously very common in a Tamiya kit. So you can see all the evidence of all the sanding that we had to do there, as well as all along those road wheels, this idler here, to get the seam that was in the middle of those, as well as the sprue gates. So you see here we have to attach those with super glue, but once we get our bogies on, all of those wheels will spin, which is very nice. Makes it really easy for painting. And then in go the sprockets. Now, each one of these bogies, there's two bogies that go on the back of the left side, and there's two different ones that go on the back of the right side. And then the front left and front right are different as well, which is why I'm building them one by one, which would be my recommendation. You can't just build all four at once. I guess you could, but this isn't a typical Tamiya kit. It's from 2006, where they kind of key it in so you can't mess up. You actually could mess up because it's just two holes for each bogie, and I don't know that it would be the end of the world. The difference is very small, but it is there with each of the bogies. So pay attention to the instructions and just make sure that you're putting the right thing in the right place. The fit onto the die cast hole, though, is basically perfect, as you would expect, which is really nice because we don't have to worry about the vehicle sitting unevenly or the wheels not touching the tracks, anything like that. And then we will go on to my least favorite part of the kits. If you watched my build of the M36 Jackson, these are the same tracks, just in a smaller scale, of course, that came in that kit. Now, the trouble being Lincoln length is that you see these long lengths are molded with a, they're molded solid, right? The gap between the tracks is not there. When we have the singular tracks that will glue on and we stretch those around the idlers and the sprockets, they're naturally going to pull, right? The way that these tracks are meant to be built is as we're doing here, we put them together, we glue them, let them sit for 5 minutes or so, and then we wrap them around and shape them. It pulls the single pieces away from each other, pulling plastic, leaving ugly holes, and I guess there should be a gap all the way around, but there isn't, or there shouldn't be. Either way you look at it, it just doesn't work well. And as you see here, having a little bit of trouble because, again, the connection to the tracks is just the flat edge, and that's not a good connection. I've said this on multiple videos now since building the H39. If you want to see how Lincoln Link tracks should be engineered and go together, those are the best I've seen, where they're touching in the middle and they're, I don't know, the parts that are supposed to be, it's like a V shape sitting in another V shape. It's much stronger than a flat edge and a flat edge, and they don't stretch. There you go. They broke again in my hand. But anyways, you get the point. What we're going to have to do is put some filler in between each of the single lengths, just like I did on the Jackson build. But moving on to the upper hull now. And we're going to get these extra pieces of armor glued onto the side. And that is one of the things that makes the Firefly the Firefly. Essentially, the British crews that got these tanks knew the weak spots, welded extra armor on, blocked the machine gun port with extra armor, things like that, as well as you'll see it has a much bigger, it's a 17-pound gun that is going to go on here, which is what makes this, in my opinion, a very interesting and, for lack of better terms, cool tank. See, we have a little bit of a jig there that they give us in the kit. It doesn't tell you to, but you should install the jig or use the jig before you install that little box. Or else, as I had to do, I just kind of hovered, and it is what it is, right? I'm not going to stay up and think about that one. And then we have a couple tools and fire extinguishers, as well as some light covers that we need to get installed and some grab handles on the back. Kind of one of the flaws of this kit, as we're looking at it, is the opening for like where the engine would be behind here. The panel lines are very, very, very shallow. If you had a scribing tool, something like that, I would definitely do some work there, make it a little bit more pronounced. Once we get even the littlest bit of paint in there, it's not even going to be deep enough to take the wash that we're going to use, but that is getting ahead. We'll kind of talk about that more, but something to think about if you were at this point in the build. Couple headlights and some hatches. You can display these hatches open if you would like, but there's no interior, so we won't be doing that. And there's no figures that come, no driver or anything like that. So we're just going to go ahead and close those up. And next we have the armor that's going to go over the machine gun port. Now this is a little bit interesting of a fit. A little bit fiddly here from Tamiya. but we get it in the end. It does slot in, but it wants to sit on that little weld bead. And if it doesn't sit absolutely perfectly, it wants to fall off. And a piece of additional armor there, and we'll finish up the machine gun port. After we drop it a couple times, of course, as is tradition. Light guards. And I know these light guards are plastic, but I just built some out of photo etch and for another Sherman, and all I can say is thank you, Tamiya, for giving us plastic out of scale ones. It is just so much more of a joy to put those on than the photo etch versions. Here's our 17-pound gun that is one piece with a 2-piece muzzle brake. We'll get that slotted into the mantlet here as we keep building that up, and this will be workable. The turret can work side to side, and the gun can work obviously up and down if everything is glued in correctly. And we'll start assembling our turret here, which goes together absolutely perfectly. The flaws here with this kit are definitely the tracks, and I guess in typical Tamiya fashion, and I don't know any other 48 scale armor kits to compare it to, but there's a lot already molded on, which are things that maybe didn't need to already be molded on. You know, like the water covers, things like that. I don't know. But the detail is all there, and especially the engineering, as always, is just absolutely perfect. Better than, and I won't tell you what Sherman I'm building right now. It's not Tamiya. The engineering, the fit of everything of this kit is just worlds better than something engineered 20 years later, aka, a couple months ago. So, for any of the flaws that this kit does have, it is a joy to build. I wouldn't necessarily say that this is a beginner kit just because of those Lincoln length tracks. Although every other piece of the kit is, I think anyone would have a bad time with these tracks. I can't see any way. This is now obviously the second time I built the same tracks. Different scales, yes, but I don't see exactly how to make them work without them getting pulled apart. And there we'll get our 17-pound gun attached to our turret. And it is starting to look like a beautiful kit here, especially from the top down. It's a little bit plain of a kit if you're looking at it from like the sides, but the detail, everything from the top down is just awesome, I think, at least on this kit. And as you see, we still have the top and bottom separated from each other, and we still have not connected the tracks. Once we finish up the top of the turret here, we have the cupola and a couple hatches and things to put on. Then we'll start working on fully assembling the tank together, but still keep the tracks separate. That way we can paint those later. Nothing like a Tamiya kit. See that piece just stuck there. I know gravity's working in its favor, but another model and that piece would have just fallen off. The hatches fit very nice. They are pretty tight. You're gonna have to use your fingernail to poke this one down a little bit, but we're able to get it. And then we have to attach top to the bottom. Now, I don't show it because I ended up mangling 2 of these things. I don't even know what they were called, but you need a very small screwdriver, which I did not have. So I found these kind of metal pins, I don't know, and was able to eventually get those. But hey, look, the tracks broke. Surprise, surprise. So we have primed in our Tamiya surface primer, kind of as always, which is my go-to primer, and it also works on metal and resin and other things. Once we have that done, I know this isn't an accurate color, but I had it sitting on my shelf, and it's brighter than, you know, your typical olive drab or dark green, which I really, really like. I have a lot of dark, Tamiya's especially. Tamiya's olive drabs are really, really dark. And it's probably accurate. I don't know. I'm not a paint expert, and I don't want to be. But this keeps it light, it keeps it fresh, and it's still going to look very, very good in the end. I'm not putting this on a, you know, table to be judged. I guess I'm putting it on the internet to be judged. Please be nice. But anyways, really, really nice. And I love Tamiya rattle cans. Especially, I have a small male modeler in the house, and I'm trying to use the airbrush a little bit less. And I have less time to use it, more importantly. Spray paint gets the job done, and it gets it done quick, which is really, really nice. Plus, these lacquer paints hold up to a lot more than an acrylic does. Here you see we did a German gray for the tracks. Again, another one that's just been sitting on my shelf for years and years. I'm finally saying, let's use it, right? It costs like $8 or $9 at the time. Might as well use it. That's the base layer, and then we're dry brushing a gunmetal on top of those. Basically, just give it two different shades. It's having a metallic and a gray shade. Again, probably not overly accurate. US tracks probably were a little bit darker than that, but it gives it a really nice look, like a really nice metallic look in the end, and I think brings a lot more to it than if you just painted it in like the dark iron Tamiya color. Gives it more depth and things. Then we have to paint the tools, which most of these, everything except for the shovel, is molded on, which makes this very difficult. And this is the difficult thing about Tamiya spray paint, is you can't go back and fix it really, really easily. So you have to be really, really careful not to mess up. As you can see, I did mess up. Surprise, surprise. Because I don't have the steadiest of hands. But nothing that we can't fix. If you spray their spray paints into not a solo cup, because the lacquer will eat it away, but into something a little bit tougher, you can brush paint the lacquer and do it maybe quickly outside, something like that, if you have to. Once we have the road wheels painted up, we'll attach our tracks. And in order to get this last link to stick, we're just going to put a little bit of super glue in there. As you see here, we're going to smush that together, hold it for a little bit, and we will get our tracks attached there. We have all our details painted, and we're ready to attach the top to the bottom. Once we have those two halves connected, I'm going to use this water-based top coat. It's from Mr. Hobby. Again, one of the things that's on my shelf, I'm just trying to get used up here. I know typically you go for like a gloss coat under decals. I have had absolutely no problem doing a semi-gloss. And this is a little bit more delicate on some of the tools and things. If you use the Tamiya TS13 and 80, which I almost exclusively use, they can be really, really harsh on the acrylic paints, which is, you get like a crackle effect and things like that. Not ideal, so this creates a good kind of first layer to go over those. And you don't have to wait quite as long, like, you know, days for them to fully cure, which is nice. Not too many decals or decals. It is a British kit after all on this kit. But I love red and yellow on green. Looks awesome. So good job on Tamiya for picking good marking options, or, you know, real tanks that had these marking options, but I think you get the point. Once those are all in place, we're going to fix them with Tamiya's Mark Fit Strong. Tamiya decals, everyone says they are thick. These aren't really an exception to that. They're pretty typical Tamiya decals, but I will say in my experience, if you're going to use their decals, use their setting solution. It works much better, in my opinion, than any of the others. The others are great, just not on Tamiya decals. Then as you see there, we have this sealed with Tamiya TS80, which is their matte or clear coat. That seals in the decals and also gets us ready for weathering. Now, I let this sit, and we'll get back to this in a second, but I let this sit for days, maybe 2. Typically, I let the TS80 sit on there for like a week before I start weathering, and we'll get to why in a second. But first, we'll brush paint this dark brown, this enamel wash all over, basically highlighting every single recessed area, panel lines, things like that. And I'm going to let that set up. I like it to be kind of visibly dry. So while we're doing that, we're going to brush on this Trax wash. It's just another dark brown wash. You could easily just have used the same one. But again, things that I actually have 2 of these that need to get used up. So here we are. And we're just going to let that one sit. But what we're going to do with the first that we put on is we'll remove any large excess here with a Q-tip. And as you see here, some of these panel lines and things are really, really shallow. And if I put a Q-tip over them, I'm going to take away all of the wash. So what I'm going to do here is just take away kind of the clumps. And then we'll come back with a brush that's soaked in a little enamel thinner. As you see here, we're just going to blend the wash into itself. We're not going to do a lot of weathering on this kit. In fact, this is only one of 2 weathering steps that we're going to do. So we want this to be pretty pronounced and to really shine. This layer is crucial. Honestly, the pin wash is probably the most crucial step in any weathering. But when it's really all you're going to do, then it's really, really crucial. Because this is going to make the vehicle 3-dimensional, and you're just going to be able to see a lot more when you look at it. It's also going to give it a little bit of a dirty patina look as we kind of wipe it all over with that Q-tip. As you see there, just trying to stay away from the details too much. And then I'm going to do something I have never done before. As you see there, we have a green and a white oil brusher. And we're going to use these to dry brush. Now, typically I've always just used acrylic paint for oil, for dry brushing. I don't know if I'll ever do it a different way again. And if you haven't tried dry brushing with oils and you have the oil brusher sitting around, this is a fantastic method. It looks like a lot right away, as any oil does, because even when nothing is showing up in that napkin, you're going to put it, paper towel, whatever you're wiping it on. You put it on the vehicle and it's going to just be bright green all of a sudden. It's an oil paint. Keep working it, right? Blend it into itself. And instead of just getting this singular highlighted streak of paint, you're going to actually get like a blend of paint. And it's going to end up brightening an entire piece, right? An entire panel if you wanted to. It's really, really nice. And maybe this wasn't the perfect, realistic color to dry brush over it. It ends up making it a little bit like olivey in the end, but I really like the effect. If I was going to weather this further, maybe I'd do something like a little darker, but anyways, love it. You can see how it looks after that. One quick problem, as you see that little haze there, And this is why I mentioned the TS80 earlier. That happens when the clear coat has not fully cured, and that enamel thinner, which will eat into the lacquer, starts to kind of cloud it, right? And it traps moisture in there. Super easy fix. It's really scary when it happens. Spray the model again. If that doesn't work, you can't go back and change anything, but as you see here, it fixed the haze. So very, very happy with that. And that does it for our build. We are done with this one. So if you made it this far, and of course, as always, I would thank you for watching up to this point. If you haven't already, I'd please ask you to like and subscribe to the channel. We will be doing many more model builds. Like I said earlier, I don't know if I'm going to do more 48th scale armor, although you never know when there's a subject or something out there that you just want to do. Some of their aircraft from Tamiya come with 48th scale stuff, whatever. Super happy with how this came out. Most of what we'll be doing is 35th scale armor and 45th and 72 scale aircraft, as well as hopefully some other stuff as we go further here. But I think a great example of this is how I always used to weather my kits was wash, dry brush. Just always. Never went further than that. And it had been a long time since I did that. It was the Hellcat that I built, I don't know, a couple months ago now, where it was the first time where I was like, that's all I'm going to do this one, because it was such a nice looking, perfect kit. And so that's where we stopped again today. And I don't know, a nice reminder that you don't always need to go fully over the top. This was an inexpensive kit. This you could build in a day if you wanted to. You could easily do this in a weekend. This is, again, not like a beginner kit, just simply because of the tracks, but it's really, really close to a beginner kit. It's definitely in the palette cleanser type category, and I just don't think you can go wrong with this. Like I said earlier, if you haven't tried using, I'm still really experimenting with oils and figuring out, the best way to use them. And the different ways you can use them is really any way you can use anything else. I highly recommend giving them a shot with dry brushing. Like I said earlier, it's going to look really, really stark at first, but you can just keep working that dry brush and keep blending it. And as you see here, you get, a nice multi-tonal look with the wash and everything. So really, really a big fan of that. And something, I always like to do something that I haven't done before, and would urge, anyone else that is always learning, I guess, new modeling techniques to do the same. So that does it for this build. You can see what is coming down the road in the background. Gray plastic, HVSS bogies there. A little bit of a spoiler alert, although there's multiple manufacturers that make that. And I'm glad that there's kits like this out there that are much, much easier. But I'm also glad that there's kits like that have a ton of detail. And I think you guys will be very excited to see that as well. So, as always, thank you guys again for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.